You're listening to Hockey Talk on the Rock
All right, stop.
with Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
Kick things off. Big time. Friday, here we go. Hockey Talk on the Rock. It is Friday, March the 12th. We are back for episode 22, I think.
Woohoo, 22.
22, double twos. And we got Laura. I'm Keith. We're on Salt Spring, and we're going to talk some hockey. And I'm going to throw to Laura. She can recap the Canucks week to start off, I think.
Sounds good. Yeah, the Canucks had, a pretty good week. I know it doesn't necessarily feel that way because of how it's ended, but, they won 3 in a row. They beat Toronto twice and then Montreal. And I think kind of starting things off, that second win against Toronto was the most impressive for multiple reasons. All these wins this week were without Pettersson. So first of all, I think that was nice to see the guys kind of step up. And I think sometimes when your star or one of your star players on the team goes down, it actually kind of makes the players around them have to play better. So, I really noticed in that game, specifically against Toronto, the first one, Miller and Besser both played very well. They're very noticeable. I also think that Hamonic played his best game as a Canuck. I think it was the second Toronto game. It was either the second Toronto game or the first Montreal game, but I thought he had a strong game, and his influence over Quinn Hughes is now kind of starting to be seen. I think Hughes has been better defensively of late, and I think a part of it is him. I still think he was a very good addition to this team. It's just a shame he was injured, and it's a shame the team started the way that they did, because all in all, it doesn't really matter now, right? Anyway, then they went on. They kind of exercised some demons in winning that game against Montreal. It was the first game that they'd won after giving up the first goal, which, mentally was a big thing. But then, unfortunately, the last game against Montreal, they laid a bit of an egg. The whole team came out flat, and the first game against Montreal, they didn't play well either in the beginning. They came on as the game went on, and Gaudette scored that goal. It was nice to see him actually get one, but I do think the starts are starting to become a problem for this team, where they're just trying to rely too much on Thatcher Demko, and he's played great, but he can't score goals for you, and he can't stop every puck. So figure out a way to get more engaged early. And again, not to lay into Travis Green, because I still do think he's a good coach, but there just seems to be something wrong. If the team continually comes out and is not engaged in games that they should be, then that to me is a coaching thing. And they've been okay. They've been better this past month in general, I'd say. But the whole thing that I'm getting to is that because they were so awful for so long, and then, they beat Toronto, which was a big moral victories. They beat Montreal the one game, and things look good. And what I'm scared about is Jim Benning, and I think we might have talked about this a bit last week, but he's going to look at this team, he's going to look at how they've been playing, and he's going to say, oh, well, it's kind of too hard to trade people because of the pandemic, and it looks like we're going to be in the battle, so I'm just going to stay pat, and then not move anyone and use those two things as the excuses, oh, we want to try and stay competitive, or we can't move money because you have to take money back right now to move anyone. So that's my fear for the Canucks, is that they're going to be mediocre, or not mediocre. They're actually going to be good, but because of their start, they'll end up being mediocre, and then they'll miss the playoffs and not get anyone at the trade deadline, and end up in that kind of murky middle, which this year, I do have a note about this, doesn't necessarily mean anything, not necessarily a bad thing, because I do think because of the draft and how these players haven't played in a full year, for some of these guys, the scouting is going to be all over the place, and so it probably doesn't matter if you have the third overall pick versus the 10th this year, or the 15th or whatever. But Yeah,
I think that definitely harkens back to things we've talked about in past episodes about how scouting could be so difficult, and if there was ever a year to move draft picks,
it would be
this
this
would be
year.
it because you never know. Like you said, it's gonna be more of a crapshoot. I want to compliment you on your Benning impression. That was actually really awesome. And I guess the only thing that could be worse than what you surmised there is that it could be even worse in the sense that he could be convinced to trade and improve, like give
I
up
mean,
assets.
I think the only thing saving us from that scenario is the pandemic, and I don't think Aquilini is very convinced to spend money right now. I think the most of the owners, and there's kind of a theory of why Toronto should go all in this year, is because they're one of the few teams that will spend money, and it's going to be a buyer's market at the trade deadline. So if there's ever a year to go all in and you have owners that are willing to spend, this is the year, right?
Mhm.
But I don't really think that the Aquilinis are in that position. So any move they make, I really do think it's going to be dollar in, dollar out, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is.
So I gotta say that in a few of those games, I found that I like Zach McEwen, but having seen Michaelis and Hauerluck in a few games now makes me realize that, like, he's a very replaceable type of player, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I felt like they brought a good energy to that bottom six.
I think just the speed, right? Like for me, and I think my whipping boy over the past like month has been Jay Beagle, because again, I think we've talked about this on the show, but like he's so slow.
Yeah.
But when you infuse him with speed, he's not that bad. Like it doesn't bug me as much. But yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think they just need to keep playing these guys to see what they have. I still would like McEwen in some more games. I think his physical element is something that's unique for the Canucks. But the other player that we haven't talked much about, and I think it's really becoming clear that his career is crashing down, is Antoine Roussel. And I liked Antoine Roussel. Like I'll say I still do. But when he was signed, I thought that was something the Canucks could use. And the first year he was here, I thought he had a decent year. But now, like, I don't know what he does.
He penalty kills decently when he's not the one in the box.
Yeah.
But that was actually one thing I wanted to ask you was, do you think based on their cap issues and bad contracts that could you see them offering something, not much, but something to Seattle to take Roussel? Because he might be the type of player that they might say, yeah, he's worth taking a fourth with to just take him.
Yeah, and again, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what the Canucks, like who the Canucks are actually going to protect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we've talked about this before, because Seattle's pick from Vancouver is not going to be a good player, and I almost wonder if you don't even need to give them any incentive, like almost like Vegas taking Spiza, right?
But this is an area where they could get rid of more money, right? Like if
Yeah,
Seattle's not impressed with anybody, they'll just take Cole Lind or somebody
sure.
who's an entry level deal that's not any money.
I think the Canucks might protect Coland.
Really? And I mean,
Yeah,
it's not unheard of for them to take a UFA that hasn't expired from their contract yet either.
that's true.
I'm just letting it go. I think Vegas did that with about 5 guys.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it's possible, and the whole expansion is gonna be fascinating to watch. But
I can't wait. I can't wait for the playoffs and the season to be over and the expansion draft. Just I don't know. I mean, I love that hockey's on. It just doesn't feel like everyone who's playing hockey is as committed as everybody else that's playing hockey.
Yeah, no, for
Feels
sure.
like a bit of a weird one.
I think that this year too, and this is kind of going off of that, because they're only playing in the division, it's become very clear who the top four teams are in each division really fast. And so there isn't really that much excitement over like, oh, who's gonna make it? Or look, there's like 4 or 5 teams that are separated by 3 points and it's anyone's game right now. Because like looking across the league, there's this clear separation, and if there isn't the clear separation, there is when you look at the games played, right? And I think that that's kind of contributed to this kind of like fatigue in the middle of the season, as well as them just repeatedly playing the same team.
Yeah.
So I'll be excited when the playoffs come around, obviously, but not as much as if the Canucks were in them.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see once that third round happens and teams start playing teams that they haven't played all year.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Look like
it'll be fun to see who comes out of each division as the champion or whatever too.
Yeah, and like on a kind of separate note, tearing it back towards the Canucks for 2 seconds, of two more points. So one of them is about goes to Pettersson, and again he was out this week, and sounds like he's going to be out for another week. And Miller moving into center, which I think really did stimulate his game or forced him to be more engaged, right? And then that brings up the question of if he should be playing center, and if you could have like a Besser, Miller, Hoglander line, and then either slide Pettersson onto the wing for Horvat, which would be interesting to see because, again, Horvat's never had really any decent wingers. And maybe like Horvat, Petey, and Pearson or whatever.
I like that idea because obviously the Hoglander, Besser, and Miller showed that they were a pretty good possession driving line. They had some good goals and stuff like that. For 2 reasons, I think Petey would work. A, like you say, it would be nice for Bo to have a really skillful winger, and B, Pearson's in a hell of a slump.
No, he's
I think he needs some kind of jump too, and I think having Petey on that line would probably help get him going. Because what is he at, like 1 point in the last 19 games or something like that?
I think he has 9 points this season, and something like 1 in the last 20 or something. It hasn't been good, and he is obviously a player that goes through slumps. He's a hot and cold kind of player, but there's something clearly wrong. And again, like I don't know if you're gonna try and sell him, how many teams are gonna line? They'll line up for him because he's won a cup, essentially. But it would be better if he was playing.
And he's on an expiring contract on a decent little deal.
Yeah. But then the other thing that I just wanted to quickly talk about was we've talked about Travis Green obviously a lot. The other coach for the Canucks that does not have a contract beyond this year is Ian Clark. And I think that one is maybe more important. We saw what he did with Markstrom. We've seen what he's done with Demko now. And he is a big name in the goalie coach business. And if he walks, it'll be, I think, it's not going to be great.
He will. It's a pattern, right? First, Judd Brackett, because they want to save some money on the scouting. Then we're going to see Ian Clark go. They'll try to save some money on the goalies. Travis Green will walk, try to save some money on the coaching.
Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like a bit of a pattern right now? It might not go that way.
It does seem like a pattern. And the only thing I can say is if Green walks and like they keep Jim Benning, who are they gonna hire for a coach? Like if they fire Jim Benning and Green walks, I'm not as mad because whoever comes in was probably gonna bring their own coach, right?
Yeah.
So that's fine. But right now, I mean, like obviously there's like Gerard Gallant and like people like that who are out there, but I don't think the Canucks are gonna spend the money to bring in someone like that.
No, they would be going down to somebody who's looking for their first shot again.
Yeah. So, and that is a pattern too right now with this team, as we've talked about before, with both the GM and the coaching positions. They seem to like to give it to guys who are coming up and getting their first shot. Yeah. The other thing, and this is stolen from Elliot Friedman, but with Jim Benning, he kind of threw out the idea that maybe the Canucks would go to him and be like, hey, we want to hire a new GM, but we like you. We like your scouting. Would you stay and head up our scouting department?
Yeah.
You don't see it? I can kind of see it.
No, I feel like after 7 years on the job, I think that would be an ego thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I just feel like he must realize he's not super suited to being a GM.
I think if anything, they might be able to pull off what you're saying by giving him a title like special advisor
Yeah.
or
What
something.
about president?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if they would give him that title.
Yeah. Anyway, the whole Benning thing it's played out, but I think we all know there's nothing happening until the end of the year.
Correct.
And if
But
then.
on that topic, things again in the North Division have happened with Calgary
Yes.
moving on from. I think we touched on it last week because it had happened, and
Yeah.
Sutter hadn't come in yet, but now he's in.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something about that just quickly before. The crazy thing for me is, do you know how many coaches Brad Treliving has had?
I'm gonna go with 6.
5. So pretty
Okay.
close. But
So
again,
Hartley, Glutzen,
Peters.
Ward, Peters, and now Sutter. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you always hear, right? Like, oh, you get one bullet if you're a GM, and that's to fire your coach, and then you're done. But it's just crazy to me that he's had 5.
And it sounds like he's got another bullet in the chamber of we can trade the Gojo Monahan guys and shake up the core. And like
Yeah.
it sounds like he's gonna have rain on that too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done a pretty good job. I'll give it to him.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job at scouting the Canucks. And
Well, I mean, he's got some young guys that like Dubé and Mangiapane that
Yeah.
like, I think anybody would like to have those young guys on their team.
yeah, and those are all, not super high end, like they weren't super high picks. And they've turned out pretty well for them. So I think he gets some credit. And I really like Mangiapane. Like I really like his game. I've noticed him a few times in Calgary games, and it makes me mad that he plays for them. So, but I mean, even like the Lindholm trade was pretty good for Calgary.
I was just going to bring up how he brought in Lindholm and Hannafin
Yeah,
and basically moved out Dougie, who wasn't working out anyway.
he wanted to look at those museums.
That's right.
But yeah, I think, they go back to what's old with Daryl Sutter. And the thing for me that was weird about that was that they gave him the 3 years. But we did talk about this last week because,
He already had it in place, but
yeah.
results changed him over time. And they're 1-0 in the second Sutter era. And
Yeah, want to know.
seemed like
Do
it
you
was
think
pretty
that
boring.
there's going to be any other coaching changes this season?
Not in the Canadian division. I would say that's a lock. But in America, yeah, I mean, I haven't, like you, I don't think I've paid that much attention to the American divisions. I mean, certainly not as much as Team Canada up here. But yeah, I feel like there's teams out there where if Dave Poyle's not going to get fired in Nashville, he might play the coach card, even though he just played it. Because there's something wrong in Nashville. And
Very weird, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, Dallas maybe, but Rick Bowness just got the job.
Yeah.
It's tough. There's definitely teams out there that are underperforming that I could see shake things up. I've actually read that the Rangers are thinking about moving on from Quinn already.
Yeah, I heard that one as well. For me, I was thinking, like, obviously Nashville, New York, or Buffalo being the obvious choices. But I don't think Buffalo's gonna fire Kruger for some weird reason, which means they'll probably fire him like tonight now. But I just get this feeling they're gonna stay with him for the year.
So weird.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a gut feeling. But other NHL news about the draft came out this week. So they've twinkled or twiddled with it a bit, and making so that you can't jump up more than 10 spots for the lottery. I still think 10 is pretty good chance. Like if you finish with the 10th worst record, not 10th worst. I don't know how to say that. But you could still have a pretty decent team, right? To jump up to first. But the things that I like about what they're changing is that you can only win it twice in a 5-year span, and they're only going to do the lottery for the first 2 positions. So that means if you're Detroit this year, basically, that you can only drop to 3rd and not 4th.
Yeah, I like that. I like both of those.
Yeah, so I think both of them are overdue.
I think I would have added in a caveat of you can't win a lottery in back-to-back years either,
Yeah,
like the New York thing.
yeah. But yeah, it was long overdue, as you say. I think there's 3 teams that we can think of, like off the top of our heads, like New York, New Jersey, and Edmonton, that have all benefited from multiple wins. Although I think New Jersey got like the 2 weakest. Although Jack Hughes is looking better, and actually Nico Heischer's a decent player, but it's still not like the level you'd expect.
Not when people like Makar and stuff like that went after them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of all I have, honestly. Oh, actually, I have another question for you.
Okay.
What's going on with Carter Hart?
Oh man, his confidence is shook, obviously, hey? He's getting shelled every time they put him in now.
It's so devastating for my fantasy team.
It's devastating to see, and it's so weird to see Brian Elliott playing like his best year since he was an all-star.
Yeah.
So who would have saw that coming? I mean, I almost contemplated picking up Elliott in our pool just for the hell of it, for competition's sake. But man, yeah, I don't know what's going on in Philly. They're playing very inconsistently compared to how they came out in the first 15 games of the season.
Yeah.
And well, you know, like you say, it could be just getting tired of playing the same teams, which is kind of a weird excuse because you still do play your division rivals quite a bit during a regular year. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe they just got ahead of themselves and started being like, okay, we're ready for the playoffs, and they haven't made it there yet. But yeah, I don't know. Carter Hart, it's called a sophomore slump, I guess, or something.
Yeah, it's surprising for sure. I didn't expect him to look like that or look that flat. And yeah, I thought in general Philly would have quite a few. Like I thought they'd be more dominant in that division, I guess, even though they're in a tough division. So
But I
there's
think at the beginning of the year, both you and I underestimated Washington and Boston and Pittsburgh.
honestly Washington to me is more surprising because I really felt like they were going to take a step back this year. And then they've been fine. They've had the goalie injuries and they've been okay. They've had lots of different stuff happening. Like Ovechkin's not really scoring and they're still winning. Backstrom's been amazing. So
And they had like the Russian forward out for those games and they won them all, kind of thing.
yeah, they've been surprisingly good. And then Boston,
You know, since Tom Wilson got suspended.
that was the other thing. I did have 2 other things to talk about, I guess. So there's the Tom Wilson suspension, which was an interesting one, I think, only because like the hit was from the front.
Yeah.
And it was called boarding, which is okay, but I think that's the first suspension for boarding that's been like not from behind. And like he did, obviously I understand like why the suspension happened. I don't like the hit, but I think if it was anyone other than Tom Wilson, we probably wouldn't have a suspension.
I think you would have, but I think it wouldn't have been 7 games. I think it would have been 1 or 2, only based on like how much it impacted. Who was it, Carlo?
Yeah.
Like it destroyed his brain somehow, and it didn't even look like it connected that hard to his head, but it must have.
Yeah. Anyway, that was kind of the big drama of the week. And then the last thing I did want to touch on was the Jordan Binnington contract. So
Right.
he gets the good old 6x6 and okay, I'm gonna look it up. What was Matt Murray's contract? Is it higher than that? It might be 6.5.
It was 6.25 by 4, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so a little bit more money but less term. But yeah, like I guess I understand why St. Louis did it on one hand because they don't really have anyone else.
Right.
And he won them a cup, so that goes for a lot. And I understand why Bennington signed that deal. It's pretty nice for him. I like how. Did you hear him talking like afterwards? He's like, it's not all about making the bank or something. And I was like, for a goalie, that's pretty. Like, it's not a $10 million contract. Okay, you didn't get Bobrovsky, you didn't get Price, but that's pretty high.
Yeah.
So anyway, whatever. I thought those were funny comments, but
He
I
probably could have
don't.
made more per year if he went on like a 4-year deal, you know?
Sure, yeah. I don't have any faith in him ever regaining what he had in his first year. I think he's a pretty middle of the road goalie, so it will be what it will be, but I think for like comparison's sake, if Demko keeps playing the way he has, this was the other thing I wanted to talk about. See, they all come up now. Like, if Demko is the MVP of this team at the end of the year and it's not even close, how much money is he gonna ask for?
He's not going to get it though because it's a one season. It's a one-off, right? I mean, I'm sure bubble Demko or whatever, but
Yeah.
Even before this contract, Bennington bridged for 2-4.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that is like the upper limit I could see Demko getting, considering Bennington extended at 2-4 after winning a cup.
Yeah, I mean, but Bennington in that way he didn't have a full season as a starter and then either, right? Because
Right.
he came in like January, and I don't think he really started being the starter until like the middle of February
Okay.
for their run. So I kind of understand what St. Louis did there. Like, yeah, obviously you won a cup, you're gonna get money, but it's hard to tell how consistent you're gonna be. And I don't know. I think if Demko can come in and say I'm a legitimate starter and I put up these numbers that are like upper echelon in the league, and you saw me perform in the playoffs, I could see him signing for somewhere between 4 and 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what is it? He's only 1 year away from UFA, isn't he? Or 2 years or
that
something?
too.
So
26?
I think it's either they have to get him 1 year deal to keep his rights, or they're going to look long term, I think.
Yeah.
So if they do the longer term thing, I could see them doing like a 4x4 or a 5x4.
Yeah.
Like 4 years or 5 years by 4 mil.
Yeah.
I don't know, to give him that extra term, because like even with the bubble and last season and this short season, what is he gonna have, like 80 games to his name?
Something like that, yeah. What was Markstrom's deal last year? Because
6x6.
it like last year though, like before when he was on the
Oh,
Canucks.
he was on wasn't he at like 3.85?
Yeah, because I guess that would be the comparable I would go to as a team.
Right.
Because like Markstrom started becoming, he became the starter late in his career, or later than normal, I guess. And he didn't have that much like experience being the starter before they signed him to that deal.
Right.
So I would probably go with something like that as the comparable.
Fair.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, that triple-headed monster for the Canucks of RFAs is gonna take its toll, I think. But I do think on one hand, we've talked about this too before, but because it's the pandemic, they might get a break and not have to break the bank on this first deal. And I was trying to think who it was. It's obviously not Toronto. But I think we've talked about this before with Matt Barzal being kind of the comparative for Pettersson.
Yeah.
And I still think that's true. And if you can get them, shorter term, although if you do shorter term, you're kicking. This is what Thomas Drance talks about all the time, right? Like with Besser, because they went short term with him. But if he has another season like this year, next year, they're gonna have to pay him a bunch more money, basically.
Right.
And I think the year after that, Horvat is up. So it gets harder for the Canucks, no matter what.
Well, the Besser contract is one of those ones that's scheduled, so the last year is like
it's up.
Yeah, so they're gonna have to pay him no matter how he did. And
yeah.
I think they gambled on that.
Yeah.
And it's paying off. The Horvat deal, yeah, he's gonna get a raise, big raise. I don't
He'll
know.
get something, I think, around 6.
Yep.
If he went UFA, he might get, I don't know, 7. But it's just, yeah, it's dollar again. The Canucks are in this position because they didn't manage the cap well before, and unfortunately now it's going to get harder to infuse that lineup with talent, which is what we see, you know, around the league. And some teams do it well, and some teams don't. But the real test kind of starts now, basically.
On the second half of the season schedule now, when they play Edmonton tomorrow, no?
Yeah, Edmonton tomorrow, and then again on Monday.
Right.
So, I mean, that'll be a test, although Edmonton plays tonight, which is nice. Right? I think they play tonight.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think they'll be on the back. Yeah, they play Ottawa again tonight. So, you know, they might not really have to play, but at least they might be a bit tired out.
So they'll get like 8 or 9 goals tonight.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Okay, well, I think that's all I got.
That's all I got. I came in with nothing. I was just going to try and feed off of what you had and anything else. I guess last thing, the rumor Tyler Mott might get traded. What do you think? No?
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about that earlier. Well, you know me, I love Tyler Mott. So I think it depends on what they get back, because there's obviously going to be interest in him, but yeah, I don't know. There shouldn't be any untouchables on the Canucks right now, like outside of, you know, 3 players kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if they got something decent for Mott back, I'd be okay with it. But if it's like a 3rd round pick, I don't know.
They're talking.
I do have one more tiny thing about the draft picks this year, because the thing that's going to be really fascinating, I think, is that the first couple rounds, the draft picks are going to be like definitely lower value, right? Because you don't really know who you're getting. But I think in the later rounds, it's actually going to be reversed, because again, it's going to be like you got a shot at getting probably a star.
So you're thinking, if on a normal year, this is the value up here of like a first, and then we work our way down?
Yeah.
But you're saying that it's going to go more like this year?
Yeah. Because it's just like more of a crapshoot, right? So the more
I think so.
You have,
I'm 100% with you. I think in 2 to 3 to 5 years, we're going to be like, how the hell did that guy go to the 7th round? Or, you know, I feel like there's going to be a bunch of those. And I'm like, oh yeah, it was that COVID year where nobody knew how good anybody was.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I love looking back at those drafts. Anyway.
Well, I think that'll take us to next Friday, where we can do it all again. Talk about how the Canucks did against Edmonton and someone else, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I can't remember who they play after. It might be Ottawa, actually.
There you go.
They might get Ottawa next, so, you know, another couple of hopefully good games.
Alrighty, well, here we go again. That was episode 22. We talked about the Canucks and a couple other things, and we'll be back at you guys next week. So that's Laura, I'm Keith. Hockey Talk on the Rock. Thanks for listening.